A Golfer and His Caddy. My caddy Bob and I were on the back nine of a virtually unused rustic golf course near Lake Nelson, British Columbia. We were on a transcontinental backroads trip hitting remote and little-used tracks across the northern U.S. and Canada. Bob had just chopped out of a trap and had about a 20-footer left for double. I was deep in some tall grass between two traps, chipping for bogey. Tough hole. As I approached the bag to grab a wedge, I glanced at Bob and saw an ordinary party-sized yellow balloon hanging in the air off his right shoulder. He saw me looking and looked himself. The balloon was no more than 20 feet away, and there was a string hanging down from it. When Bob saw it, he did what I knew he would do. He walked towards it with the idea of grabbing the string. But there was a steep bank on the back of the elevated green, and as Bob descended, he dropped below the level where he could grab the string. It was just a few inches out of his reach. We both looked around for some sort of promontory that would give us another crack at it, but the slope was severe. In any case, the balloon moved higher and wafted on a seemingly conspiratorial zephyr into a black spruce stand and disappeared. It was obvious what we had to do. No words were spoken. I grabbed our clubs and threw them behind a bush, and we went into the forest after the balloon. It was clearly going to get hung up in the branches, and we were going to be able to capture it. If we couldn't catch it, even better. We would see where it went. Maybe some of this requires some explanation. Bob was indeed technically my caddy. He was carrying the bag. That ought to tell you something right there. Bag singular. We each carried half a set of clubs in the one bag. Bob had indeed started out as my caddy years previously, but had long since evolved into my playing partner and close friend. Nonetheless, he continued carrying the bag so we could walk the backwoods courses of the world instead of riding pathetically in a cart. Mark Twain said golf was a country walk ruined. We viewed it as a country walk greatly enhanced. Also, Bob had been strengthened to grizzly bear proportions by his years of looping and was able to maintain that by carrying, whereas I was somewhat frail due to injuries suffered in a career of teaching mathematics to junior high school kids, half of whom were smarter than me. Most of those injuries were not physical. Bob relished the challenge and physicality of shouldering the bag. He was fitted for it. I was fitted for shanking the ball into the thistles at crucial points in our matches and laughing about it. Bob hit many fewer bad shots, but he was a laugher too. In any case, there we were. We had thrown our sticks aside and plunged into the boreal forest like a pair of Nepalese drum beaters trying to flush a tiger. Who cares if our clubs weren't there when we got back? There wasn't anybody on the course anyway. This course was truly bush league. We had folded 220s into a birdhouse on the first tee for greens fees. No other cars were in the tiny gravel lot. Bob fell down once in some ferns and almost took half the forest down with him. I also took a header and felt like I left half my foot in some kind of rodent hole. Neither of us offered to help the other up. Sportsmanship, on or off the course, only goes so far, and this was what fun is. The woods quickly opened onto an old rutted logging road. There was a black Suburban parked with two guys leaning against the front side right in front of us. The guys had earpieces, and there were tall aerials on the car. Bob and I stopped dead. The two guys looked at each other and pulled Glocks. Bob turned and started to run back into the woods. He was immediately tackled by two other guys who we hadn't seen. I don't know how they did that. Bob, being as big and fast as he was, must have been highly trained in the art of capturing escaped zoo animals. But Bob was down. I turned and started to go towards him, and one of the two Glock guys said, "Leave it." The voice left me no options. I left it and turned back toward the car. The second guy moved quickly behind me and, not too roughly, zipped my hands behind me. He put a black cloth sack over my head and forced me down on my butt. I said loudly, "Bob, you okay?" Which brought a quick cuff to the back of my head and no reply from Bob except some muffled groans and thrashing in the weeds. I thought they must have gagged him. The hours after that were a little hazy. I got a shot in the arm that didn't sting too bad and that kind of blurred me. I was wary of lying in the back of a car, presumably the Suburban, and then being in a dark room for many hours. Days. My wits had returned a bit after the shot, and I spent the time working on a proof of Lagrange's four-square theorem. Like, for instance, 4 equals 1 squared plus 1 squared plus 1 squared plus 1 squared. And 30 equals 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared plus 4 squared. I could feel that it was true, but I wanted to see it and know that it was true. And then I pulled myself together and started thinking about what was going on. At one point, the lights came on, and I found myself in a too small hotel room, like in some kind of Spartan but immaculate Days Inn. A light knock on the door. Bob came in. He was dressed casually, no longer in golf clothes, and looked relaxed. He said, in a voice I had never heard in all the years I had known him, "They're friendlies. Sorry." I just looked at him. I was glad to see he was okay. "There are some things you need to know," he said, in the same unfamiliar voice. "The balloon?" I said. "Pure chance," said Bob. "When we stumbled on them, they had to take us." I waited. "They're Navy intelligence, assigned to Fort Detrick. We have to help them." "What about our clubs?" "They've got 'em. And the car, all our gear." "What about my brother?" "They know you go for weeks without contact. They'll come up with something when it's needed." He allowed me some time to consider things. I said, "Why'd you run?" He smiled. "Didn't know who they were." By the third day after that, I knew enough to know I didn't need to know any more. Bob had had a previous career in bacteriology that he had failed to mention. We were in a low building in what I figured was either the Yukon or the Northwestern Territories. I've never known which was which. I didn't bother to ask. It had been a short ride in the back of a Black Hawk, and there didn't seem to have been a way to look out the windows. The current view was 10 miles of featureless tundra in all 360 degrees. Quite interesting, really, if you had an interest in nesting migratory shorebirds, which I did. I spent a little time trying to make up a fake Inuit name for the place, something involving the sky, distance, and nowhere. I didn't bother to think about escape. I could see the tracking device taped securely to my ankle. Plus, I'm not stupid enough to think that was the real tracking device. Plus, there was nowhere to go. And I didn't really feel like a prisoner. The food was good. I could wander at will in some of the tiled corridors and outside. There was a shapely, blue-eyed lady captain who was assigned to share meals with me and tuck me in at night. Flirting with her was no different than it would have been in the outside world. She was totally and sweetly evasive and could converse on literary and non-specific cultural matters easily and competently, even some mathematics. It was actually delightful. I hadn't seen Bob in several days. I knew not to ask about him. "You're not really a captain, are you?" I said to her. "Never said I was," she replied. I pointed at one of her shoulder boards with the 4 golden stripes. She smiled. She had a lovely smile. "You're not even in the Navy, are you?" She smiled again, but didn't say, "Never said I was." "Is Bob okay?" No smile. "He'll be okay. He's going to make a big difference." I looked at her with not entirely faked concern. She reached out and patted my hand, our first physical contact. She said, "The less you know, ... and she trailed off. She got up and walked away. Years later, whenever Bob got a particularly bad lie in deep weeds with a root behind his ball, I would say, "That's no problem, Bob. You have abilities and knowledge that are unique on this planet. What looks like an insolvable golfing problem to others is mere child's play to you." Bob was forced to allow me to complete every syllable of this peroration every single time it was warranted, even on the rare occasions when we were playing with others. It was his payment, endured gracefully each time in toto, in return for me never asking any questions after the Black Hawk dropped us off near a Kroger parking lot in Spokane.